President Jang and Se Roi come face to face in Danbam, and the air is full of tension as they greet each other. President Jang takes a seat with Suwa and Gun-won, and Iso openly recognizes President Jang, complimenting his reputation in the food business. She takes his order, their best stew and stir-fry. Gun-soo says that his father likes strong flavors, and Se Roi decides on the mung bean sprout pork belly stir-fry and sundubu. He tells the team that he doesn't want to show any flaws today and requests that they conduct business as usual. Gun-soo serves the appetizers to his father's table as usual, and President Jang says that Gun-soo is in the wrong place. Gun-soo asks if he has a place in Jang-ga, and President Jang suggests that they discuss the topic later. Gun-soo wishes them an enjoyable meal. In the kitchen, Se Roi spaces out and doesn't notice the boiling water until Hyunhee tells him. When Se Roi serves the two dishes to President Jang presumes that Se Roi invested all of his father's life insurance money when Jang-ga's stocks plummeted 8 years ago, and he asks why. Se Roi sensibly responds that he believed in Jang-ga to maintain their brand and quality products despite their bruised image as a result of Gun-won's scandal. He considered Jang-ga to be a worthwhile investment in the long term, and then asks about his investment this morning. Gun-won looks shocked that Se Roi owns this much money. Se Roi insists that the reasons for his investment are the same as 8 years ago, but President Jang doesn't believe him and calls him out on his lousy lies. After President Jang finishes 2 dishes, he tells Se Roi that he had big expectations of Danbam, but now that he's tasted the food, he hardly considers Danbam a worthy competitor. For the sake of Se Roi and as a favor to Se Roi's father, he sternly advises Se Roi to give up and take it easy, and he gets up to leave. Se Roi hardens at the mention of his father and tells President Jang that giving up is impossible. Iso watches intently as Se Roi asserts, although it may be slow, I am taking the next steps, and you are my end goal. Gun-won tries to belittle him, but Se Roi yells at him to shut up, and Gun-won obediently retreats. As a favor to my dad? The only thing you can do for my father is to get on your knees and receive fair punishment, and I'm going to make it happen. President Jang warns him that tigers don't growl, they just shred you to pieces. He promises to show Se Roi how it's done and walks out, followed by Gun-won and Suwa. Iso finds Se Roi on the rooftop looking up a video of a tiger growling, and she laughs. Se Roi accuses the old man of knowing nothing about tigers. Iso thinks that he should have suppressed his anger, but Se Roi is fine with President Jang viewing him as a non-threatening child. Se Roi messages his old classmate. He asks to meet up. Ho-jin agrees to meet up with Se Roi, and we see him in his fancy apartment. He thinks back to when he visited Se Roi in jail. He filled out the form for his visit and hesitated when completing the relationship. In the visiting room, Ho-jin asked why Se Roi punched Gun-won, and Se Roi responded that it was uncomfortable to watch and that Ho-jin doesn't need to be too grateful. He blamed Se Roi's rash personality for his imprisonment. Then, Ho-jin shared that he got accepted to Hankook University's business school. Se Roi considered that an opportunity to forget his past, but Ho-jin said that forgetting one's past is a luxury for people who haven't experienced the abuse he suffered. Ho-jin admitted that he still woke up from nightmares of Gun-won and would frequently find himself on the rooftop at night, contemplating suicide. He said, "Those 3 years were too long, and the only way I could bear the hell was thinking about revenge." Then, Ho-jin shared that his dream is to become a fund manager. Se Roi shared that his dream upon release is to open up a pub that will take down Jang-ga. Ho-jin said that it would be hard to take down Jang-ga unless Se Roi had a talented fund manager on his side, and Se Roi takes the offer. Se Roi put his fist against the glass and asked Ho-jin if he wants to be on his side. Ho-jin's fist pumped against the glass and said that this was the reason he came to visit. Flashing back to the visitation form, we see that Ho-jin filled out his relationship with Se Roi as friend. Back in the present, Se Roi meets Ho-jin at his apartment. Ho-jin calls the 1.9 billion won investment impulsive and says they could have waited a year for 500 million won increase. Se Roi asks why Ho-jin didn't stop him. Why did Se Roi trust him, a mere student at the time, with his father's life insurance money? Se Roi says that he doesn't know much about stocks, but he knew enough about Ho-jin to trust him. Seeing that Ho-jin suffered through hell in high school and still got accepted to the best university, Se Roi knew that Ho-jin was tenacious. He says that he still gets goosebumps thinking about that meeting with Min-young. Flashback to Se Roi and Ho-jin's meeting with Min-young, where they came clean about Ho-jin approaching Min-young with ulterior motives. While Min-young was close colleague to Se Roi's father, she said that she doesn't act on compassion. Se Roi pointed out that Min-young's stocks doubled in value under Ho-jin's management. Se Roi offered to take her side in case there was ever a shareholders meeting. She lauded his pub establishment but noted that his pub wouldn't be worth a fraction of Jang-ga. Se Roi asked if his contribution would be significant if he held 1% of shares. Even then, she said that the 1% wouldn't be much help. Se Roi confidently responded that if he achieved that 1%, he would disprove her assessment of him as a newbie, and his 1% would surely help her one day. Then, he added that he isn't desperate for her alliance. Min-young laughed at Se Roi. Min-young asked Se Roi what he wants. and he said that he wants Min Young to inherit Jang-ga. Se-Roi promised to support Min Young when they select Jang-ga's new representative. After some thought, Min Young pointed out that unlike Se-Roi, President Jang barely considers Se-Roi as an enemy, saying that his premature promises aren't enough to move her pacifism. Se-Roi let that rejection sink in and stood up to leave, but Min Young wasn't done. Min Young said that she trusts President Jang's intuition more than Se-Roi's words or her own discernment. She listed the food industry's top companies after Jang Jie and said that these are places that President Jang eats at. She challenged Se-Roi to bring President Jang into his hole-in-the-wall pub. If President Jang is bothered enough by Danbam, then Min Young would consider him worth her bets. The moment he stepped foot in Danbam, Se-Roi could see President Jang's back, ready to be stabbed. After President Jang's visit, Se-Roi and Ho Jin meet with Min Young, who acknowledges Se-Roi's move to lure in President Jang to Danbam with his sudden investment. Se-Roi finds Min Young's withdrawal from other stocks and full investment in Jang Jie as a sign that she made up her mind. She outstretches her hand to her new partner, and Se-Roi seals the deal with a handshake. President Jang summons Min Young to his home for a game of baduk, and Min Young carefully suggests that President Jang consider someone outside his lineage. She notes that it's a trend nowadays and says that many others at Jang Jie who are better than Gunwon. As President Jang puts down a baduk stone, he says that Min Young is the person for the job. A tense silence ensues until President Jang puts down the stone in defeat. As Min Young heads out, President Jang says that he only trusts Min Young, and Min Young reciprocates this. After she leaves, Secretary Kim enters, and President Jang pulls out the photos of Min Young and Se-Roi shaking hands. Danbam closes for the night, and Iso watches Se-Roi as she analyzes his relationship with Jang-ga. She notes that although Se-Roi seems like a pushover that lives as he pleases, he's following a plan devised 8 years ago. Iso seems annoyed that she doesn't know this part of Se-Roi's life. Se-Roi answers a call from Ho Jin and tells Iso that he's heading out. She asks to join him and asks where he's going, but he doesn't share. He tells Iso and Gun-soo to close the shop after they wrap up, and dejected Iso goes back to the counter to finish business. Gun-soo recalls Iso hinting at Se-Roi's history with Gun-won, and he asks Iso to share what she knows. Iso claims that she doesn't know anything, but Gun-soo can tell that she knows something. Iso angrily tells him to back off and stop asking her for his own family's business, and she storms off. As Se-Roi reviews the list of President Jang's shareholders, Ho Jin worries that they pounced prematurely, since they're still 12% behind. But Se-Roi says that they have a card to play. Ho Jin seems doubtful that their card, but Se-Roi is determined to keep trying. At Jang Jie HQ, President Jang scolds Gunwon for the squandered money on the Best Pub show. President Jang insults Gunwon for his lack of talent and disposition, and he points out that his actions implied that Jang Jie was inferior to Danbam. He irately dismisses Gunwon and seems further convinced that Gunwon isn't the right heir. As Gunwon leaves his father's office, he passes by Gun-soo in the hallway, and Gun-soo states that their father summoned him. Gunwon asks why, and Gun-soo says that he must be insecure. Gunwon slaps him, and Gun-soo says it's been a while since he's been hit by his brother. Gun-soo realizes that all those beatings when he was younger were rooted in Gunwon's insecurity. Gun-soo tells him to shake off his concern because he's not interested in taking his spot, and enters his father's office. When President Jang sees Gun-soo, he asks what happened to his face, and Gun-soo says that the question is familiar from his youth. President Jang puts brochure on the table and suggests that Gun-soo study abroad and visit his mother. He asks his father to explain their relationship to Se-Roi and admits that he was afraid to ask Se-Roi because he knew that their family were the bad guys. President Jang assures his son that he's not at fault. He says that good and bad are decided by the winner, and he has always won. He's disappointed that his son would go out into the world and decide to work at a small pub. President Jang orders him to quit working at the pub. Gun-soo firmly tells his father that he won't live following his father's orders. Are you sure that Danbam is the small fish? Roi Hyung is stronger than you think. He bows respectfully before leaving his father. Sua stops at a crosswalk and sees the bus stop where Se-Roi vowed to save her from her limbo between him and Jang-ga. She calls him just as he crosses the street in front of her, and she honks to get his attention. As Sua and Se-Roi walk together, Sua asks how Se-Roi saved up so much money, and Se-Roi says that it's a secret. She wonders if he's keeping this from her because she's a Jang Jie person, but he explains that he doesn't want to pull her into his fight against President Jang. Sua admits that she's confused by her allegiances. She's doing her best for the company, but she also found joy in Se-Roi's promise to release her from Jang-ga. She wishes that he would stop, but would find herself rooting for him. Se-Roi walks alongside her and shares why he came to like her. He reminds her of the day that she was late to her college interview and insisted on running the entire distance on her own without help. He watched her enter the college building and fell for her confidence, the way that she seemed to take full responsibility of herself. You just need to be on your side. Sua takes comfort in those words. At Danbam, an English-speaking couple enters, and and Sei-Roi immediately looks to Tony to converse with the customers. Tony looks at them blankly and tells Sei-Roi that he can't speak English. He never claimed to speak English, they just assumed that he could. Sei-Roi asks where he lived before coming to Korea a year ago, and Tony says that he's from Guinea, so he speaks fluent French. Hyunhee worries that if Iso finds out, Tony will get fired. Iso and Gun-soo sit overlooking the river, and Gun-soo asks if she likes Sei-Roi. She asks how he'll respond if she confirms that she likes him and asks if he cares. Iso knows that Gun-soo likes her and admits that she approached him knowing that he came from a wealthy family because she thought the connection would help her. Then, she soon realized that he was completely unselfish when it came to pursuing her or his inheritance. She admits that she likes Sei-Roi, but she's not super earnest about her crush. Then, she tells Gun-soo that he still has an opportunity and says that if by chance, he selfishly wants to pursue her, he should first take over Janga. Gun-soo looks at her earnestly, but she says that she was joking. At Dambam, Sei-Roi asks Tony if he likes working there, and Tony responds positively. Sei-Roi instructs him to learn English, just as Iso and Gun-soo return from their outing. They brace themselves, and Sungkwon holds Tony's hand, and Iso updates them that she was able to score an ice machine. And Sei-Roi heads out again. Iso pouts that Sei-Roi is heading out on personal business again, and quickly puts on her PPL lip tint before following him out. And Tony asks about Iso and Sei-Roi's relationship. Sungkwon says that they're just owner and manager, but Tony seems to smell something fishy. Iso catches up to Sei-Roi and asks to be included in his personal business, since it could affect the pub. As Dambam's manager, even with personal business, she wants to help carry his burden, so he invites her along with a warning that it may be an uncomfortable and long commute. Iso smiles and happily takes Sei-Roi's arm to follow him wherever he's going. In the bus to Pageon, Sei-Roi shares his story with Iso. She narrates, in the racing bus, he talked non-stop about what his father meant to him, Jang Gun-won, the beginning of the ill-fated relationship with President Jang, the ensuing death of his father, the hidden truth, a friend named Lee Ho-jin, their plan for revenge, the time spent on the plan. He talked calmly and endlessly, and I listened carefully. When they finally arrive in Pageon, Sei-Roi leads them to a house, where a father and daughter hang laundry. The daughter runs to Sei-Roi in delight, but the father, the former police officer on the Sei-Roi's father's case, doesn't welcome him. The daughter asks why he visits despite her father's disapproval, and Sei-Roi responds that he wants her father on his side. As they eat, Iso learns that this man is their distributor for Dambam. Sei-Roi credits Officer O's produce for Dambam's success. Sei-Roi asks Haewon what her dream is, and she shares that she wants to become a police officer. Sei-Roi says that he also once dreamed of becoming a police officer, and Haewon asks why he didn't pursue his dream. Officer O cuts the conversation short by instructing Haewon to collect the rest of the laundry, and he finds a moment to speak with Officer O separately. Sei-Roi comments on how Haewon has grown to be vigorous and kind, unlike her father. Officer O asks Sei-Roi to stop calling him officer, but Sei-Roi insists on the title, since he was the officer in charge of his father's case. Officer O recalls his boss warning to stay out of the case if he wants to continue making a living, and he also remembers Sei-Roi's sentencing. Getting on his knees, Officer O apologizes and asks Sei-Roi to stop visiting him. Officer O promises to compensate him for everything. He tells Officer O that only thing he can do for him is to tell the truth and turn himself in. Officer O should be a father who can proudly support his daughter's dreams. Officer O cries about his daughter's future without her father, and he insists that Officer O pay his price. Crying helplessly, Officer O has no other excuse or defense. Night falls, and Sei-Roi finds Iso asleep. He puts his jacket over her as a blanket. Iso wakes up and asks for an update on the plan to get Officer O to confess, which will lead to Gun-won's imprisonment and poaching of President Jang's shareholders. Iso rolls over to use Sei-Roi's leg as a pillow, and she claims that she can't sleep well on the floor. And Sei-Roi says that they need to head out soon to catch the last bus. Iso opens her eyes and notices a large scar on Sei-Roi's forearm, and Sei-Roi says it's from an injury during his deep-sea fishing days. Then, Iso notices more scars on his bicep, and Sei-Roi says that those were from manual labor. She gets emotional and says that he must have been lonely. Sei-Roi admits that he was a bit lonely, and Iso begins to cry. When I felt pain about his past, I realized that my feelings for him was love. She grabs his arm and continues to cry. I was overwhelmed with emotion. I never want him to suffer alone, and I would kill anyone who hurt him. I love him. On the bus ride back to Seoul, Iso nods off. He lends his shoulder for Iso to sleep comfortably. The next morning, Iso stops in her tracks at the sight of a line formed outside a popular pub. Suwa runs into her. Suwa says that she was on her way to Dambam to borrow ice, and Iso seems even more repulsed by Suwa now that she's heard Sei-Roi's full history, and notes that Sei-Roi must trust Iso. Then, Suwa asks if Iso was behind the stock purchase, and Iso accusingly asks if Suwa is going to tattle to President Jang. She asks to borrow ice, and Iso rejects her. They find Sei-Roi outside, and Suwa gets permission from Sei-Roi to borrow ice. She thanks Iso as she walks in. Sei-Roi introduces Iso to their building owner and seems to have bad news. As Suwa gets ice, Sei-Roi tells his team that the new building owner wants to increase their rent by 5%. But the owner wants them to leave at the end of their contract and run his business there. Suwa joins the conversation and asks how long they have until their contract runs out. Sei-Roi answers that they took over the lease, so they have about half a year left. Suwa looks at their contract and says that tenants are protected from getting kicked out of the space, but the annual 5% rent increase is allowed. But Suwa advises that conflict with the building owner is unfavorable. She seems troubled by the owner's plan to run his business in the building, and Iso agrees. Iso has seen these cases before and suspects that the owner wants to claim the rent premium for himself. Sei-Roi says that he'll give the new owner a call and try to work out a deal. When Sei-Roi calls the new owner, he introduces himself brightly, but the voice on the other end sounds familiar. The new owner introduces himself. It's me, Jang Dae-hee.